At least one person is dead and more than 3,000 injured as the most violent demonstrations seen for a decade continue in Turkey. The United States has raised concern over the Erdogan government's crackdown on protesters and urged authorities to exercise restraint.
The more police in Ankara pushed protesters, the more protesters pushed back, despite hundreds of arrests and an arsenal of options aimed at dispersing crowds. It's tough to imagine this is how protests in Turkey began almost a week ago over plans to develop an Istanbul green space. A piece of the park was shattered by tear gas, and the focus for protesters shifted from the park to the Prime Minister, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's been in power for the last decade.
He has big ego, he has this, Napoleon syndrome on it. He thinks himself as the next sultan and controlling all this Middle Eastern politics and such. He needs to stop doing that. He's just a Prime Minister. And he needs to remember that we people elected him.
During a visit to Morocco, Erdogan addressed the criticism.
Tayyip Erdogan diktatörmüş.
Tayyip Erdogan is a dictator? If you are the kind of person who can call someone who serves their people a dictator, then I have no words for you.
Protests have grown to other cities across Turkey. Claims of excessive violence are also growing.
In these days especially, they're like monsters. They can't do that.
That has gotten the attention of the United States.
We are concerned by the reports of excessive use of force by police. We obviously hope that there will be a full investigation of those incidents and full restraint from the police force with respect to those kinds of incidents.
Well, the Prime Minister says the situation here appears to be calming down. Attempts by police here to push crowds back and 5 days of firing tear gas only seem to fuel anti-government demonstrations. Greg Navarro, World News Australia.
Shortly, the turmoil in Turkey. Australia's Turkish community speaks out about what's behind it. Many here share the view that Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's decade in power has seen him grow more arrogant and authoritarian. They say he's working against the country's secular foundations by seeking to impose conservative Islamic reforms. But not everyone agrees.
Their protest wasn't as big as those in Turkey, but after marches in Sydney and Melbourne, it was Canberra's Turkish population speaking out against Prime Minister Erdogan.
Now he's just like totally not listening to anyone. He's just becoming a one-man show, and people are very afraid.
They want to be religion's government, but we don't want.
Erdogan's Justice and Development Party has been in power for more than a decade. In that time, Turkey's economy has boomed and its voice on the world stage has increased dramatically. But more recently, Erdogan's critics say he's become increasingly authoritarian, imposing a curb on alcohol consumption and even public displays of affection.
The Turks, with Atatürk's legacy, see themselves more as European and as secular. And Erdogan is threatening the foundations, the secular foundations of the republic.
The unrest was sparked by protests against government plans to redevelop Istanbul's Taksim Square, a rallying point for mass demonstrations. The clashes with police that followed only fueled their anger, which has continued for close to a week.
The protesters, he called a couple of bombs in the street. Even devout Muslims in Turkey are coming up against Erdogan, saying, we don't approve this violence.
He's been at the centre of Turkish politics for 15 years. He has sort of complete control over that political party. They don't really have a caucus operating either. So he, at the moment, has probably, we could say, muzzled his opposition in his own party.
But Mr Houston says he doesn't see Turkish secularism being under threat.
The narratives about Turkey are often too black or white. Secularist people are always scared that they've somehow got an Islamic agenda, but they haven't started to do it yet, or that they're doing something secretly. So there is a degree of paranoia.
Erdogan has openly taunted his critics to try and vote him out at the next election, but many of them are hoping a vote will come much sooner as a result of their protest. Manny Tsigas, World News Australia.